Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to Eric and Timo show. So this is the last of the Nephio talks that we have in this DNTF, and with Eric we wanted to give you an overview of release 1, which was released this summer, and about release 2, which is ongoing and planned to be released in December, and then something maybe kind of looking even a little bit beyond that. So in Nephio, for those who don't know, the release cycle has been agreed to be twice a year. So it looks like that we will be having every summer and every December around that time frame releases coming out. So it's a bit interesting because, for example, Kubernetes follows a different route. So we are not in sync, probably never will be, but that doesn't really cause a big problem for us. And the presentation that we will be sharing with you is something that our colleagues John and Wim gave last week at the KubeCon Telco Day. So quite some slides are proudly stole from that. And then at the end of the presentation, we will share with you some resources and link to the Wim and John's presentation is then also available there, so you can compare. How did we do? Okay, maybe you start with this one. Yep. Okay, and then back to the next one.
So, okay, I think you are all aware about the telco landscape on what we want to achieve in the next coming year. So our key objective within telco is really to use take benefit from software and be able to deploy all our network function on top of virtualized infrastructure. So globally, that is the key target. As we started the journey maybe 10 years ago, we had a discussion at lunchtime when we launched HCNAV. We still have some work to perform, but just to clarify where we are today and maybe why also we decided to work on Nephio. Typically, we won't deploy all our network function in public cloud, in a centralized region and so on. Like you can see on the right part of the slide, we will deploy some specific core network function in this cloud environment. We know that we need also to deploy some function closer to the customer, typically the UPF or 5G, for example, for local breakout and so on. And typically, we deploy this kind of function in, let's say, what we call telco aggregation. It depends on the terminology, but typically it's much more, let's say, regional in the country based, where we have, let's say, some numbers of sites in a country. Maybe 100 is maybe a lot, but maybe let's say 10 to 100 for a dedicated country like France, for example. And also, we will big objective from telco community is also to deploy all the RAN function on top also of virtualized infra. And as a result, we'll have to manage thousands of sites. Typically, for example, in France, country I know well, we manage, I think, around 20,000 sites where we have deployed some antenna. If we are jumping in this RAN solution, we may deploy maybe not 20,000 sites, but maybe a large number of sites. So we are dealing with big figure in this, let's say, telco landscape. And if we want to automate all these pieces, if I want to automate, let's say, my network function in, let's say, 1,000 sites, for example, for my CU component, for every CU, I have a bunch of parameters to manage and so on. So we know that we need some right tools to perform this, let's say, scale automation to be able to deploy all these elements, and also to be able to, let's say, to manage them automatically, to manage their life cycle, and so on. So we have this big, let's say, challenge behind us. And also, that's also one reason to use a Nephio solution as presented by this morning by Sandeep and by Ishti. We have also some capability, we'll explain later, using this package variant concept that should enable us to be able, let's say, to take a blueprint and to deploy it in a large number, let's say, of sites. And this is something that is very, let's say, interesting also coming from Nephio. So Nephio at the beginning takes this challenge as input to, let's say, to be able to provide an automation framework or automation solutions to be able to deal with these big challenges.
Okay, and I would be surprised if there would be very many people in the room who have not seen this one, because it's been around for 1.5 years now, a little more. But I think kind of use this as an excuse to discuss a couple of different things. One is we've heard about swim lanes today quite many times, and at least for me in the beginning it was a bit of a strange term. So here I introduce you with 3 swim lanes, which are denoted by the numbers 1, 2, and 3. So basically these are kind of focus areas of Nephio project. So basically kind of 3 different areas where further development on top of Kubernetes was seen necessary. So everything's based on Kubernetes. I think that's clear by now. So the reason for Nephio was that the community thought that there is, well, everything is not yet ready just with Kubernetes. So something is needed on top of it, especially in a telco use case. And the 3 areas are, as you can see here, it's the cloud infra management. So number 1, so taking care of having the parameters and stuff in place that cater for this specific environment. The workload resources, automation, or the lifecycle management of network functions, if you like, are the second one, so like sort of day 0 type of thing. And that deals then with kind of telling the Kubernetes environment what should be done and how this is carried out. And then on the right-hand side, we have the kind of a workload or network function configuration. That's the third big area where work is intended to be carried out. On top of that, you see open APIs. So basically, Kubernetes is a common denominator for Nephio, and so is intent-based kind of interface towards the orchestrator up there. We don't name any orchestrators, but of course, for example, in the Linux Foundation networking, we have one candidate that we can at least test how well this works. And the third kind of aspect here on this picture is you see some familiar names and acronyms in terms like Anuket, like ETSI, like 3GPP, and then some secret message in form of O2 and O1. Of course, it relates to ORAN. So all these things are something that Nephio community considers and understands they exist and does want to adhere to. So collaboration and collaboration with these entities, as well as understanding how they have been defining the world in these areas is relevant information for Nephio, and people will, or communities is kind of taking that into the consideration when developing the solutions. And I think now we end up move over to release the basic stuff still.
Yeah, basic. So maybe we will repeat what has been described just before, but with a different angle, different vision.
Well, repetition is mother of all learning. So
exactly. So we decided in Nephio, the basic concept, as said previously, it's really to be based on Kubernetes resource model. So why? Because Kubernetes is well known to orchestrate containers, but it's not only that. Kubernetes is also a powerful framework to manage API. And it offers a large number of capability for that. Typically, so first of all, it's really API centric, intent based also. So you define what you want to deploy with a desired state, and you can manage also some observed state, because to be honest, when you deploy, you want to deploy your workload or whatever, you want to have a desired state, but there is some times between when you start to deploy and to perform some action and the times when you achieve your desired state. So there is also some mechanism within Kubernetes to manage the status of your desired state, for example. And typically that's something we also have discussed yesterday about intent based and so on. To have this kind of report of the intent is very important, and it is within Kubernetes. It's natively included in Kubernetes. So with Kubernetes, you have also some kind of metadata, so you can reuse, and you can also have some powerful mechanism to index them and to find any kind, let's say, of resources based on such, let's say, metadata. You have this very impressive mechanism to extend all the existing concepts included with the Kubernetes, like the pod controller or any kind of basic controllers that are delivered with Kubernetes release, but you can also extend with your own definition. What is very key also from Kubernetes is this capability to define some resource that are not only linked towards, let's say, some let's say virtualized workload environment, but as presented previously, you can also define your antenna tilt, but you can define also some hardware server. You can define, let's say, whatever external resources you want to monitor, and you have the capability to do it. So it's very very powerful, and we use it and abuse of it in Nephio. Everything we want to manage and we want to deploy, we use this mechanism for that. I will explain a little bit after. So you have also some mechanism typically with this global API server and TCD storage to, let's say, to watch any evolution on any resource you want to let's say to monitor and to control. And this is also automatically provided by the Kubernetes machinery, let's say. And you have also a global ecosystem. So if you want to build, when you define your own custom resource, you need to define some specific controller to manage and to define what you want to deploy and so on. And the good news, you have a lot of tools to help you to define, to develop this component. So there is a large number of tools within the ecosystem, and you can be helped by a very big ecosystem. This one? Yeah. So configuration as data. So, so once again, as said, I think it's also a keyword to say we don't want Helm, we don't want other kind of package, but only the KPT package one. I will explain with my vision. So it's a complementary vision from what did HT before, but the objective is really to have, let's say, some powerful way to define, let's say, the various data you need to manage in your automation framework. On some key capabilities for me, it's yes, the possibility to manipulate this data either by a human using some your classical editor or a UI that is provided by Nephio, for example, or that can be easily managed by, let's say, automation tools. So it's key also to have this both capabilities, because we know well in real life, sometimes automation tool will perform some modification on the data, but sometimes you need also to have some human interaction, because everything cannot be automated at that time. One key also element is to be able to have this kind of, let's say, capability to validate, to mutate the, let's say, all this package. So with well-defined function and so on, and you will modify your package and, let's say, be sure that your package will be always consistent and so on. So it's also very important. And last but not least, it's really the capability to use, let's say, some reusable function, the famous KRM function, that can manipulate your KRM, your package based on KRM files, resources, and then you can reuse it in many, let's say, many contexts. And that's something that was demonstrated also during release 1. As an example, for example, we use some KRM function to manipulate, for example, the FreeFileGC IMF function. We did it for FreeFileGC, but another team from another open source solution, OpenAir interface, you reuse exactly the same function without modifying it, and it's working fine. So I think it's also a good example to leverage this, let's say, powerful of this KRM function. This is so an analogy that has been introduced within the community to also to try to demonstrate how this concept of package variant set that we just introduced this morning with Sandeep on with HT after, how it relates to the components managed by Kubernetes, by default Kubernetes. In Kubernetes, you have basic concepts like deployment, daemon set, or stateful set, typically that are, let's say, managed by controller, embedded controller in Kubernetes, that will manage pods, and these pods are running on top of nodes within a dedicated cluster. Now we have this kind of analogy where we are managing, let's say, network function. So the idea here is really to explain that we want to manipulate network function. So network function, in some way, will be deployed in top of cluster. So this cluster can be distributed across the country. And we'll have, on top of this network function, some dedicated controller function that will, let's say, manipulate your network function. And typically, there is that's the role of the package variant set, to be able to take a package, a blueprint package from a source, and to be able to deploy it in a large number, let's say, of cluster. And this is very important to have this kind of tools when you want to deploy at scale your network function. And this package variant set is very, let's say, on package variant in a global sense, is really a key concept from Nephio. So very important, when you want to jump into Nephio, you need to understand this concept of package variant. So this is just the analogy between basic Kubernetes, where we are managing pod. In Nephio, we intend to manage much more network function. Now I will add some vocabulary. I think you should be familiar now with the various Nephio sessions. Blueprint. So typically, a vendor will provide a blueprint, a package blueprint. So this blueprint is not ready to be consumed by your GitOps engine. So on the right part, you can see it's a very high-level view of Nephio component. So Nephio component are deployed in a management cluster. You will have this Porch component, other Nephio component, or other stuff. And this is the main component. And obviously, you have some kind of repository where you will store all your packages. So you start the journey with a blueprint package. So it's you define your various, let's say, Kubernetes resource for your network function, for example. And now you have all these process of, let's say, render this blueprint towards, let's say, resources that can be consumed by your GitOps controller to use the resources to be deployed in the, let's say, target cluster. So the first step is really to do the fan out action. So what is fan out is really to deploy this, let's say, blueprint in, let's say, in different, let's say, Git repo with also some additional information. So typically, if I want to deploy, for example, my UPF, I can have a fan out action telling I want to deploy my UPF in all edge cluster, but I want also to inject additional information in my package. For example, to get, let's say, information about, I don't know, the IP address or ingress information about my cluster or any kind of specific information that can be useful for the specialization. And after, you have the specialization. And the specialization is key and is very a key component for Nephio. Typically, when I deploy my UPF, the vendor has no knowledge about, let's say, the IP address that will be used at the end of the day in the target cluster. So within Nephio, we develop some specific KRM function that are able, let's say, to populate the IP address needed typically for the entry and 6 interface for UPF, and automatically will fetch the right information. For example, in an IPAM, will fetch additional information in the package and will generate, let's say, all the, let's say, the Kubernetes resource with, let's say, the right information, the right IP address, the right route, and so on. On all these, let's say, function are, let's say, quite generic, have been demonstrated in the context of 3.5GC, but are very powerful. And as a result, you will have, let's say, all, let's say, the detailed parameters that can be used for the deployment in target cluster. And this is a key, I think, very key value from Nephio to be able to generate from a blueprint package towards a package to be ready in the target environment. On that scale, it's very important to have this kind of mechanism, because when you are working in, for example, in 5G core network, where you manage maybe one AMF function, you maybe don't need this kind of feature. But if you want to deploy your EPF in hundreds of sites, you need to have this kind of mechanism to help you in this automation journey. So this is an example. It's not really readable. It's just to explain what is a blueprint package. To give you example, you will have the slide and you have various, let's say, elements, and you can see some example of custom resources that have been introduced in Nephio. It has not been described a lot today. We have also this KPT file. So within your KPT package, you will have all your Kubernetes resources you want to be to deploy, but you also have this KPT file that will describe the pipeline of action you want to perform on your package. And that's very specific to KPT and Nephio. And at the end of the day, you will have your deployment manifest ready to be consumed by your GitOps engine in your target cluster. So for the R1 user stories, the list of use cases that have been demonstrated. So the objective was really to demonstrate a telco use case for this R1. So we take the example of the 3.5GC as demonstrated this morning, and to also to be able, let's say, to provide additional, let's say, operation, typically to upgrade the user plane capacity and to upgrade the control plane capacity based on some scaling on UPF or SNF. So what we did, we developed all the we package, let's say, all the free 5GC network function. We took only a subset of this function to be managed by a specific Kubernetes operator. I will show you just after. And we also, we see Nephio, as demonstrated this morning. We deploy all the workload cluster using the Nephio management solution. We had also some UI to be able to manage some package within the solution. It was also demonstrated quite fast, but the networking, typically the topology between all the cluster for this use case was also defined using Kubernetes model. Typically all the topology between the clusters, all the interfaces and so on was also defined using this KRM, and a specific controller has been developed to be able to take into input this topology defined as a KRM, and let's say to deploy the right configuration towards the virtual router. And also demonstrated to be sure that all that has been deployed was working fine. We use URI and SIM tools to simulate some UE on the RAN and to be sure that the global system is working fine. So time is running. Maybe I like this slide because this is my feature. So
that might be one of the most honest things I've ever heard a committee member say.
So just to remind the Rails one use case. So we have this management cluster, the blue one at the top, where we deploy some various elements. So you have the Porsche controller, the Nephio UI, you have the Git also we deploy here. You have KPI management, typically it's to deploy the various clusters. So we are using cluster API for that. So we deploy the cluster, so the green cluster, the regional one on the edge 01, edge 02 using this KPI controller. And we have some kind of backend controllers to manage typically IPAM and so on some specific controller like the that are used by Nephio to manage when you deploy a cluster. It is registered by Nephio and so on, and you can manage, let's say, if let's say the different cluster, and to, for example, to be able after to fan out your network function or your workload in the cluster, you will use all this information. What is interesting to know also when you deploy, for example, a cluster, automatically we associate. We deploy in this cluster the config signs. It is a GitOps controller that is associated with a dedicated Git repo. Okay, so all the regional is associated with the regional repo in GitHub. So what we did in R1, so the green function here are the specific, the SMF, AMF typically are the functions that are deployed using the free 5GC operator. The other one are deployed using, let's say, classical KPT function that includes some manifest, classical manifest, but we don't use for them a specific specialization and so on. So we use this free 5GC operator that has been developed within the community to demonstrate how we can also model a network function using a custom resource definition. And for me, that's also a key objective of Nephio, is to, let's say, to propose some kind of standardization to define the CRD for the network function for 3GPP or RAN. In Nephio, as presented during the demo, so we deploy, for example, the free 5GC operator in the various clusters. So there is no magic behind that. But after, the magic is really when we deploy AMF, SMF, and UPF. So this function requires some what we call network attachment definition in Kubernetes, because they need to have, let's say, two different interfaces within their pods. And all this, let's say, network attachment definition, some configuration paths are dynamically generated by all these KRM function during the iteration process. And just to to illustrate what is doing this free5gc operator. So it takes as input a custom resource. So the idea behind also is to, with this operator way of deploying function, is also to abstract, let's say, all the details of the various, let's say, elements that you can find in your classical N charts. Today, if I want to deploy a free5gc, I will describe my config map, my service, my various pods using on all the parameters associated with. While with this approach, we define a custom resource. I don't see if we can see it, but in my custom resource, I will just define some, let's say, high-level elements, typically like the capacity. I'll define some interface, some network interface, and some config reference element. And also, my custom resource will include some specific status that is very important and to monitor the deployment, but everything is ready for that. So the objective also within Nephio was to demonstrate that we can define a custom resource. We define this custom resource for free5gc. We develop an operator that take into account this custom resource and deploy the requested elements. But for example, OpenAir interface reuse exactly the same, let's say, CRD definition, but develop their own operator to deploy their specific pods and element, because they have not exactly the same, let's say, elements behind their solution. And that's typically something we are working on for release 2, for R1 also, to be able, let's say, to define this kind of CRD and to have this kind of high-level intent definition of my network function. This is the UI. I think you saw it this morning. I won't spend some time on it, but just to show you that we can have the list of the deployment and so on. With the UI also, you can manipulate every package as you want. And I will give the floor to Timo for the release 2.
Thank you. Right. So that all was release 1, which was a handful, I would say. And release 2 then brings this the multi-vendor support, which here means that, okay, we were able to show that we can deploy free 5G core functions. How about some other 5G core functions from somebody else? So that kind of spells a multi-vendor situation. And now for release 2, this is being demonstrated by deploying OpenAir interface core and run functions. So not only that we can now deploy, then after release 2, we can deploy different kinds of different core network functions from different vendors, but also run functions. So extending from core, which is usually the easy starting point, to run, which is a little bit more complex animal. On top of that, Eric hinted towards this establishing network. So topology controller is something that is aimed to help in that. So basically you tell that I want to deploy a core network, and then the controller would be able to help you in getting all those pieces to stitch them together and get it running right. And of course, Porch will have a new release, so it's a very central piece. We need to keep in pace with that. Already during release 1 work, it was obvious that some shortcuts was needed to meet the release deadline. So we had a nice backlog to work on when entering release 2. Documentation was, I would say that we got some documentation finally done. Thanks for some very active colleagues, but it's far from being appropriate. So now we want to put some emphasis on that, so that it becomes easier for people to get involved, understand what Nephio is on their own, and then hopefully come and join us. And then of course there are different kinds of audiences for Nephio, at least we hope. So these different kinds of audiences need different kind of documentation. So that's another area. Nephio SDK have been referred to. So yes, vendors need to come up with their own CRDs when we need to make it easy for them to develop them. So that there the SDK comes to picture. Helm's support has been referred to many times, so probably no need to go into more details. Observability, service assurance, new things that have been brought in release 2 timeframe, and this network function to infra. So basically, network functions are something that have some specific needs from the infra. So we need to have a good way of conveying that and make the infra support the functions as they are needed. So that's kind of that's big chunk already for release 2. Works ongoing. As I said, we will get it done by end of the year. Very likely some of this will be just started in release 2, and then we will continue in subsequent releases, which is just the normal open source way of working. So we get the first things then, and then we improve going forward. So I don't believe that any of these are kind of done deal by release 2, but good starts in many of the areas. And while release 2 is being now worked on, of course, as good community, then we have started to kind of sketch what should go into release 3, so that come January, everybody is able and ready to start working on that. And there we have quite a few of proof of concepts lined up. So probably something that will be kind of a theme for release 3 is like what kinds of new things, additional things there might be with Nephio, and then going forward, some of them will become part of the mainstream of Nephio. Time will show. Okay, then with Eric, we wanted to kind of give you an idea of how we are organized. So we started off with the 3 SIGs, we call them special interest groups. So architecture, which deals with architecture and the requirements. So that's the main place where the next release contents is being discussed. And automation, that's where people then actually do the magic so that there is something that runs. And the release, of course, is something that takes care of the testing and making sure that the release package is then available and consumable for wider audience. Late addition to this, or very recent addition to the bunch is security, which is very good that it got its own kind of focused SIG. So definitely something that was not on the agenda for release 1 because there was already so much to be done. In the architecture group, we have split the work in so many ways. I just want to point out this this working group 2, which is really active and like I said in the beginning, we want to be collaborating with the neighboring communities, and Oran is one of the more active areas for now. And as we speak, it's today 15th.
Yes.
So almost as we speak, there is an open air interface Oran software community gathering other side of the pond, where this OAI, Oran, and Nephio collaboration is one discussion topic, and a few of our colleagues are there to discuss this. So it is something that is ongoing literally as we speak, active work. And some of the other groups like the long-term roadmap and then the kind of how the release scopes and what the kind of user stories. So those are also then maybe more with the release timing. Time-wise, they are active and then not so much during the release. I think something that we don't have here yet because it doesn't exist, but it was discussed in a few weeks ago. We had a Nephio summit. There is a kind of a conformance testing, verification, discussion. How should that look like in Nephio context? and that I think somehow nicely also ties with the earlier talk that we had on this CNF conformance being moved now from CNCF to LFN. So definitely Nephio has a stake there. So that group will be existing. In which way? Is it part of some existing group, or if it's going to be its own group? Don't know yet, but it will be. There will be a dedicated place to discuss that going forward. And in the very beginning, I promised you with a few of the resources that you have there. So there's the wiki, there's the web, there's the Git, and I think Git is one of the, Git and Slack are probably the most active areas where and I think Slack probably is missing, so maybe we can throw that into the one that is already in the meeting wiki page, but let's put that there. And the email lists of the different SIGs as well. Yeah, and at the top, I think we have this this presentation, not this presentation, but the one that John and Wim gave last week, which is kind of discussing the same topics, if you're interested in that. But I think with that, we are pretty much done. Thanks for your interest, and any questions? Oh, okay, maybe I should, it says do not touch.
Hello. Hello.
Yep.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay. At the beginning of the year, we tried to deploy Nephio, but I found in the process of deployment, we needed to download some resource from Google Docker registry. And because in China, we can't access Google website, so at last we can't successfully deploy Nephio. And I know this release one is available at present. I don't know when we deploy Nephio, is there still we need to download the resource from Google Docker?
Okay. Comment?
Yeah, did you try to use the OpenStack install? There's an OpenStack install and the Sandbox install. Some of the images that's used might still be pointing at the Google Container Tools Docker Hub. So, but that project has now moved to the CNCF, to the kept dev. So I'm not sure if they're generating the images yet for say Porch and kept in Docker, because the Google Container Tools project was a Google project, so that might have caused problems. But if you put up a message on Slack or contact me or the project afterwards, we can give you some help.
Yeah.
I think we might have to change a few things, but I think it might only be details to get it working without having to directly go to Google.
Yeah, I think that, but still, I think it's a good point. So because as has been said already earlier, I think many times, it is a Google project that was then transferred to LFN only like 2 months ago. So I think we may have some of those details that people have not been, didn't remember to check out.
Yeah.
So please bring that up to the community, and we will.
Yeah, a problem might be config. A problem might be config sync, because that's coming from an Anthos project, which I think. So, but we're looking at using Argo. We have another POC that one of our guys, Peter Cochran, is doing. So if you talk to us, we can. That's certainly something that we should have as a requirement. Okay.
Okay. And I know you have some code. The Nephio code is on GitHub, and in China we can access GitHub. So I don't know if all the resource in future can migrate to GitHub, and it's no restrict for us to visit.
Okay. Yeah, I think my immediate reaction would be similar to what Liam said, that it would be really good to bring these kind of
That's-
obstacles
Yeah.
of using and working with Nephio to the community, so that that we do have a track on these things, and then we can address them. I think it would be really useful.
Yeah, I'd say the right forum would be to go onto the SIG3 Slack,
Yeah.
because Rado and Victor from Red Hat are really good on this stuff,
Yeah.
and we'll all jump on. Okay.
Yeah, SIG release is the kind of the main
Situation.
place for discussing these kind of topics. So if you bring that to their attention, I think that's a good start.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think the past few comments have kind of summarized something that we need to think about as a global community, and not just, specific to Nephio, but how we make sure that folks from all around the globe are able to collaborate and contribute. I think that the suggestion about using, in the Nephio instance, I think the suggestion about using Slack to do the communications, especially because it's already been discussed how the meetings are not conducive to participation from folks in Asia, that will at least, maybe some asynchronous communication will help there, at least initially.
Yeah.
Adding on top what Kenny said, I mean, now Nephio is part of LFN and the LFN umbrella. Any plan from Nephio community to move from, I mean, to have like other projects, ONAP or NSC, a Confluence page, I mean, where everything is documented there, because up to now, they use Google Drive. Sometimes when I try to access to that file, it's taking me, I mean,
I'm with you there.
So I would love to see it like or NSC or ONAP, where the access to the documentation is really easy, and you can add your comment, you can inspire from the documentation. I mean, we are in learning curve with Nephio, so
I'm with you there, because I have over the year I have been grown not to like Google Drive. It doesn't work for me that well, and I think that's just because I'm so used to the way the LF networking projects work with their documentation and kind of community wiki practices are well known. So I think this is something that we probably need to bring at the TSC to kind of vet the idea, and then hope to then conclude that yes, let's use wiki more prominently than what we have done so far.
For me, wiki page is more helpful for us to.
I agree. For me as well.
Speed up the learning curve.
We've been trying to promote GitHub discussions for this, because GitHub discussions doesn't time out. The problem with using the Google Docs is all of the access from certain locations, but also it's a very unstructured way. We've been trying to promote the GitHub discussions, because the Slack has the other problem is it kind of does it does a mission impossible after, when not in 10 seconds, but after about 3 months it vanishes, because and all of the nice discussions vanishes.
Yeah,
right. Okay.
Another question. I mean, any plan for R2 or beyond R2 to cover the CNF lifecycle management? As of now, I say only deployment of CNFs. I don't know if it's valid use case or not. What about modification? What about the termination of that CNF? Assume that, for instance, I have a radio site is rehomed to some place. So as a network operator, I want to terminate that UPF close to the edge, because I rehomed the site, or I mean, I don't know if it's a valid use case, or this has to be taken as an end-to-end orchestration towards Nephio.
Well, I think if I remember what John and Wim were presenting, their take was that yes, we have been concentrating in Nephio on these swim lanes 1 and 2 to start with, and very little on the third one. But as said, all three are in the scope of the project. So whenever there's enough of hands and brilliant minds, probably then there is kind of human resources, human capital to spend time on that.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much like, where do you start first and how do you then move forward from
Because
there?
from ONAP project perspective, we're used to, I mean, CNF lifecycle management or VNF lifecycle management, we used to instantiate, terminate, and do modification.
Right.
We have seen this morning modification of the.
But that's also something that,
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't consider this end-to-end aspects at all because we had to have something for release 1 and then build on top of that for release 2. But I agree, it's like how to have the full picture. I think that's one big
I haven't
question.
seen it in the R2, or maybe I was thinking of it would come in subsequent releases, R3 or beyond.
Yes, this is how it will be, because getting release 2 contents fixed took a little too long in calendar time. So that's why the release 2 content description is not very wide and full blown. So yeah, subsequent releases probably will address some of those aspects.
And the last question, I don't know, maybe people from ONAP and Nephio, is this ONAP Nephio synergy is happening and discussion is starting to take it more further? Or?
You have the guy here.
No, well, I think the answer, broad lines, at least from me, is similar to what I just said. So it's like Nephio for sure has not been able to kind of reach out to other communities pretty much at all. So in the Nephio summit that we had like a few weeks ago, we had one panel where other communities were kind of telling us what do they think. ONAP was there, OSC was there, ORAN Alliance was there, NGMN with their Cloud Manifesto was there. Now, yesterday, I actually discussed with, last week, actually, I discussed with the ETSI-NFV chair and so forth. So there is interest for sure. And Nephio needs to be able to kind of communicate with this. And this is, again, something that is kind of on the roadmap.
As Timo said, we specified that request to Nephio specific. They have to work on northbound interfaces to connecting that to external communities such as ONAP and OSC.
Yeah.
So I think there is under discussion and the architecture, network architecture sake, but nothing concrete yet. But it's coming.
Exactly. Yeah, it's coming.
Yes. Anything else? If not, then
Thank you.
thank you very much, and sorry to take 10 minutes of your break time.